Hi, everyone. Welcome back for today's session. Today we have with us Ali Prato. She is the co-founder of Fertility Rally and hosts her own podcast, Infertile AF. Welcome to today's session.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking to you.
So I've been on Ali's podcast. We love being in this realm and connecting with other women on the journey and, trying to empower all of those going through it. Ali has started now two kind of ventures that are helping women as they go through, women and couples, I would say, as they go through this journey. So, Ali, tell us a little bit about your podcast and Fertility Rally.
Yeah, I will. Thank you so much again for having me. So basically, the podcast started because I had my own infertility journey. I had secondary infertility. So long story short, I don't want to drag on and on about it, but I had my daughter when I was 34. And I didn't have any assisted reproductive technology, but then I didn't start to try for baby number 2 until I was 37. And I did not know anything. This is embarrassing to say now, but I didn't know anything about my fertility. I didn't know about egg reserve, egg quality, ovulation, any of that stuff, because I had had a pretty, easy time getting pregnant with her and a fairly uneventful pregnancy. And, we live in New York, as do you. So things kind of happen a little bit later. So it was 37, 38, second kid, people are doing it all the time. At the time, there was tons of celebrities who were having babies later in life. So I just kind of thought that that's how it was. I didn't realize that there was going to be any sort of fertility problem, but there was. And I had what's called, secondary infertility, but recurrent pregnancy loss. I had 4 pregnancy losses between my daughter until I went to a reproductive, an REI, and, ended up going through IVF to have my son. So the whole thing for me was just so lonely. I mean, this was 10 years ago now, all in, when I kind of started going through it. And I felt so alone. Instagram wasn't a really big thing. Podcasts certainly were around, but not nearly as ubiquitous as they are now. There weren't that many books about loss or miscarriage. I've told this story before, but I went to Barnes and Noble looking for books about miscarriage that I could relate to. And there was a 2-inch thick section about loss and miscarriage and infertility. And I was like, where are all the books? And I'm a journalist, so I love research and, getting, getting education and educating myself on things. And I couldn't find anything. So I just felt so alone. And that basically is the reason that once I did have my son through IVF, thankfully it did work. And I had him just 1 round of IVF. About 2 years after he was born, I was finally kind of out of PTSD mode and was okay, I think I can talk about this now. So I set out to write a book. And again, it just wasn't there. There wasn't a good market for it at this point. I shopped around a book proposal to a lot of agents and book editors, and they were the writing's great. This is really entertaining, but this isn't going to sell. These kinds of books just don't make any money, so we can't take you on as a client. And I was what? I was so flabbergasted. I could have.
Well, it's shocking because you were one of the people that would have wanted this book, right?
Right, exactly.
What do you mean there's not a market for it? I'm the market. There are other people like me.
That's I said the same thing. And I guess I could have self-published, but then I started thinking, you know what, maybe a book's not the right move for me right now. Maybe I should start a podcast. I've always loved interviewing people. That's my background. I grew up in magazines. I was a magazine editor for 20 years, doing a lot of celebrity cover stories and things like that. So I love telling people stories and, having one-on-one conversations with people. So it just kind of all clicked one day. And I was oh, I don't need to wait for somebody to greenlight a book. I can just start a podcast and do it that way and put it out into the world. And that's what happened. So I thought of this podcast called Infertile AF, and the first episode, I told my own story because I was if I'm going to ask people to get down and dirty and tell me all the crazy, shit that they've been through, I have to do it myself too. So episode 1 is me telling my story. And then this week, our friend, Kirsten Jordan, is on my show, and she's the 219th episode. So it's been around for about 4 years, somebody different on the show every single week. And that's kind of how it all came together.
That's amazing. And so your show is basically stories
Yeah.
and I was on it to tell my fertility
Right. Yep.
story, which is so nice because I feel like because it's so lonely, it's really a good thing to just hear about other women going through it. And though it can be hard to hear, that they triumphed and that they're past it, it's kind of nice to hear success stories too. And some of them the success was in a different way. Like some of them the moving on was, it wasn't necessarily that they had a baby from their own body,
Yeah.
right? That maybe there was a different path that they took and that they that they embraced
Yeah.
eventually.
Or not even had a baby at all. That's my whole thing with the show was like, I really wanted it to be diverse and cover all sorts of different stories. So it's same-sex couples, it's single parents by choice, it's people who don't walk away with a baby at the end.
Mhm.
Some people are still in the midst of their treatment. I did a serialized one with this woman named Stacy where we did like 5 different episodes at kind of in real time as she was going through her journey. So I just really wanted to try to make anybody going through anything in terms of building their families, with assisted reproductive technology in some way, to feel like they could listen to a story and be like, oh, that's okay, I can relate to that one. There's I've had couples on, I've had men, I really try to give the giant swath of all these different family building stories, and some big celebrities and some people you've never heard of. It's just like, it doesn't really matter. It's just everybody's story, in my opinion, is important. And, I just really want to reach as many people as possible and make them feel like there's somebody they can connect to, because I think that's so important.
Yeah, and I feel like the experience I've had hosting this podcast and just connecting with this community so much is that I find people very willing to share their stories. Like it's almost like we all need to kind of break out of this hiding place because it's so lonely, it's so isolating, and there's all this stigma that's just old and not unnecessary, but it's like we can't quite get past it. Some feel ashamed, some feel like they don't want to talk to people because they're not going to say the right thing. That's totally correct in a lot of circumstances. And so when there's suddenly a forum where there's this opportunity to kind of get it out, now people are embracing that in a very public way, which is so interesting. So, for all our listeners, I encourage you to, find like a safe community and share, and yes, you may have to be careful about who you're sharing with because the audience does matter and that you will get varying levels of support depending on who it's with, but just to find that and connect with those on the journey, whether it's through Facebook or through a podcast like this, and reach out to
Yeah,
one of us if you want to tell your story.
definitely. And also, that's the reason we started Fertility Rally, which is a community that started in June of 2020. And that's another, it goes back to the podcast. This woman named Blair Nelson, who now, reached out to me via email and was like, I've been through a ton of shit and I would love to be on your show. And she was my 8th episode of the podcast. And we just kind of hit it off and we started texting and just connecting on like, anybody who's in this world knows that like there's an immediate bond when you've been through something that somebody else has been through in terms of infertility or not being able to have a baby. It's just, you kind of cut through all the bullshit and, get to like a very intimate place very quickly. And so she and I started, planning an event, and we wanted to call it Fertility Rally because we wanted to like bring people together and empower them and educate them. And then COVID hit. So the IRL event that we were planning on hosting in Brooklyn in 2020 got moved to virtual. But it was kind of a good thing actually, because then we realized that we could start doing these virtual happy hours and like meetups with people that we just met through Instagram and like through my podcast and stuff. And people would come on this Zoom call and just kind of share, week after week. And it was so wonderful. And we were getting such great feedback. And, there's nothing out there like this right now. So then we were like, should we actually do this and make this like a legit community? And that's how Fertility Rally was born. So it all kind of like happened organically. I mean, I never thought in a million years this would be my career. I started working at Playboy magazine right out of college. So like from Playboy to here is like such a pivot. But then again, when you look at like the through line, which is like, I've always loved storytelling and connecting with people, it does kind of make sense. But like, who would have thunk,
It does. And it's actually, it's really nice that on this journey that I see women unite. Like there are a lot of other areas of our lives where I feel like women, like we're not as supportive of each other as we could be, but in the realm of fertility, like everybody wants you to win. They're like,
Mhm.
they're like, oh, here's my resource. I learned this. This worked for me. Blah blah blah. Like connect with this person. So, that's really nice that you're creating a forum where more of that can happen. But
Yeah,
speaking of
that's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
speaking of stories, let's hear a little bit more about yours because recurrent pregnancy loss is really hard, and so and also a secondary infertility is sort of, it's not taken as seriously because people are like, you already have a kid, like what's the big deal? You could, like, this isn't as bad for you, right? So the whole lack of body education, totally get that. Talk about that a lot in my book.
Yep.
It's a problem. But, once you were like, okay, I'm getting super savvy about my body, tell us a bit more about the experience of like, how other people were with the secondary infertility and like, what it was like going through that.
Yeah, it was really hard. And again, I didn't even know the term secondary infertility until later, like
Mhm.
after I'd kind of been in the world for a while. But what was happening with me was, I was getting pregnant fairly easily and I just wasn't able to stay pregnant. And what happened when I finally went to Dr. Klein, who was my REI, who's wonderful, he, did an ultrasound and checked me out and was like, listen, you've got a very big egg reserve, but the problem is that, you've got these unhealthy eggs because you're older, you're over 35 now. And he said, you're a perfect candidate for IVF because I can go in there and we can find the healthy eggs and we can make healthy embryos. And then, you should be able to, once you get pregnant, you should be able to stay pregnant with a healthy embryo. And the way he framed it was really interesting. He was like, don't be mad at your body for like doing the wrong thing. Actually be grateful. I'm paraphrasing, but that your body's getting rid of these unhealthy pregnancy. It's actually doing the right thing, which was kind of an interesting way to look at it. So that made me feel a little less mad at myself because I know when you're going through something like this, a lot of people feel shame or they feel like they're broken. And I felt that too, but framing it in that way for me at least helped me realize, okay, I can do this. It's just a matter of getting a healthy embryo. So like I said, I'd had 4 losses. One was a blighted ovum, one was a chemical pregnancy. And one other thing that I've learned about early losses is that I always want to validate for people that a loss is a loss. And that's my personal opinion. I'm not saying, another thing I always say is this isn't the pain Olympics. It's not like you are in more pain than me, so your pain is more valid. I feel like if anybody's in this space, their pain is valid. So I just want for anybody listening to, if you've had an early loss or, a chemical pregnancy, which I do not like that term because I feel like it really minimizes it. And people are like, oh, well, at least it was early. That hurts, that doesn't make it any better. So I think it's important just to acknowledge that a loss is a loss, in my opinion. So anyway, I went through the IVF process, and another, part of the story was that my husband and I were really not on the same page about doing it. A lot of it was financial, and because we didn't have coverage, so it was all coming out of pocket, and it's, as you know, it's very expensive. So it was like, why are we doing this? We already have a healthy daughter and she's amazing. And not that he didn't want another baby, but it was just like he saw me going through so much pain and I was so depressed and I was like in a really dark place. And I remember saying to him, I wish I didn't want this so badly because it would make things so much easier. But that was kind of the conundrum I was in, was like, and the way that I've explained secondary infertility, and again, this is just my personal experience, but it was like, if people were saying like, well, don't be greedy, you already have a baby, or it's not as bad because you already have one. My opinion was, this isn't coming from a place of greed or like wanting more than I deserve. It was coming from a place of love. It was like, I love being a mom so much that I want to do it again. And I don't feel complete. I didn't feel like our family was complete, and I could not shake that feeling. I just couldn't shake it. And it would have been so much easier if I had, because I wouldn't have had to go through all this stuff and I wouldn't have been through so much heartache. And, we could have been happy as a family of 3. And had the IVF not worked, we would have been happy as a family of 3. That would have been okay. But, I wanted it so badly. It was like this guttural feeling and I couldn't deny it. And I just had to do everything I could to, try to get there. So my husband and I finally agreed that we would do 1 round. And if that didn't work, we were going to close the chapter. And I was like, okay. So I did, I went through the retrieval and got a bunch of eggs, but then they all, the attrition rate, as it happens, I ended up with just 5 embryos that were sent for testing. And then when the testing results came back, I only had 1 healthy embryo. So 4 of them were, had chromosomal abnormalities. So those were not going to be viable pregnancies. And 1 of them was perfect. And we did the transfer. It was April 1st, 2015, and it worked. So it was,
Thank God it worked.
yeah. I mean, it was really, honestly, a miracle. Like, I still can't believe that it worked. I think the percentage that I was told was like 60%. So it's not, that it would work that time with 1 tested healthy embryo. So it wasn't like out of the question, but now that I've met so many people that have gone through so many rounds and so many losses, and I realized that it's pretty damn lucky to have it work on the first try with 1 embryo,
Yeah, I did a podcast session on the research around how many sessions are the average for the win, basically, and it's 6. 6. I mean,
Wow.
now we're averaging like, across ages and across profiles because, you have, as you mentioned, you're a good candidate for IVF with a high AMH, right? So I have a lot of patients who have low AMH who are not as good of candidates for IVF. And I tell them that it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? I think for anybody, like, it can be, mentally settling in a way to be like, okay, you don't have to have all the pressure to succeed on 1 cycle. Now, you had that pressure. What was that like for you to be like, oh my God, if it doesn't work this time, like, I have to let go of this dream?
Yeah. Well, I went through a lot of therapy. And the one thing my therapist really helped me, the place she helped me get to was what I just said, which was like, if we are a family of 3, it's going to be okay. She really helped me reframe it and realize, like, okay, we're going to have a happy life. It's going to be amazing. My daughter is amazing. And so I think it would have been okay. So that helped take some of the pressure off. But yeah, it was like, my God, the 2-week wait, I did not test early. I did not, I did everything by the book. I wasn't going rogue at all, and nothing against early testing. I totally understand it, but I was just like, I don't want to test early because what if it's negative and then I psych myself out, but it really worked and it was just too early, or what if it's positive, but that was false positive? I just didn't want to get in that headspace. So I waited. I went to the doctor, I did the blood test, and I remember they took my blood and she's like, okay, now go home and take a nap and we'll call you in like 4 hours. And I was like, take a nap? Like, F you. Like, I'm not going to.
Yeah. Also, like, what kind of advice even is that? Like, you would think that the nurse would know what demographic she's dealing with. It's like, no, I'm actually going to be like wanting to like crawl out of my skin for the next 4 hours.
Absolutely.
If you could just make me the first person you call as soon as this comes in.
Totally.
Oh
But
my
again, like,
God.
I didn't have a community that I could lean on, like if it were now and I was going through it today and I was in Fertility Rally or some other group, I would be like texting my, sisters in this community and being like, oh my God, it's day 10, like all that stuff. I was just like, well, fingers crossed, like I'm on an island here. But I remember when she called me back and she was like, congratulations, you're pregnant. And I was just like, oh my God. And I just dropped the phone. But it was so weird too, because they were like, okay, well, call us when you deliver. And that was kind of it.
Yeah.
They just like released me into the wild. And I was like, okay.
No, people do not like graduating from the fertility clinic a lot because you're like, no, don't I get to come check another 2 days from now? Like, check me again.
100%.
Just tell me everything's okay. No, because you go from being like highly monitored to, like you say, out into the wild where the OB is like, okay, come in a few weeks or a month or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know many people who bought Dopplers and done it at home themselves, or gone to, labs that weren't part of their clinic to have beta result, all that stuff. And I get it.
So what was this like, if this is okay to kind of broach this subject, the marriage, right? Because I do find I talk to a lot of women, the men are so much more laissez-faire. Like you said, like we have this like guttural, like we must do this. It's like a deep, like instinctual kind of like, I can't even call it desire because desire is not a strong enough word. And I find the men mostly don't connect with it in the same way we do. And it can leave women feeling unsupported on the journey. So what was it like for you with your husband and your relationship?
Well, we almost got divorced. Is the gist of it. Honestly, it was bad. It was bad. So he tells his story on the 100th episode of my podcast, if anybody wants to hear it, which was really interesting because even though we were in the same journey, we had two totally separate experiences, so I don't want to totally like bag him or drag him, but he didn't want it as badly as I did. He didn't really understand why I was putting myself through so much turmoil and putting us through so much turmoil. And in his defense, he's an only child of two only children, and he had a wonderful upbringing. He had a wonderful life. So I think he was kind of, and for me, it wasn't like I need to give my daughter a sibling or I don't want to have an only child. It wasn't about that at all. But I think he was just like, well, if she's an only child, like it's going to be great. And I totally get that. But it just wasn't the same mindset that I had. So like in the thick of it, I was just like, I would have died to have the second baby. And he was kind of like, if it happens, it happens, and it was really hard. It was hard on us. I remember we were in the car once and I was like, are we going to make it? And he was like, I don't know. And like, we really didn't know if we were going to like get through this. Cause it's, it's not only wanting different things and being on different pages. It's like having to have sex on demand and it takes all the romance out of it. And, I was so laser focused on the baby. I'm sure I was neglecting him as a wife and, like not all that stuff. Like there's so much that comes into play, and I was depressed and it was seeping through to other areas of my life, I'm sure. So, it was messy. It was ugly. But we're still together. And now our daughter's 13 and our son is 7. So, it's been a ride. It's definitely been a ride. But I always say marriage is a decision, and we decided that we wanted to make it work. So we are.
That's an interesting way that you put it, because it is like when you're in the trenches of trying to make a baby and encountering these issues, it can be very taxing on the marriage. And I think more often than not, it's taxing. I do see some couples that really like come together and unite, and it's like very like loving, but by and large, there's more strife that occurs, and it breaks some marriages. What do you think it was for you that made you be like, I'm sticking with this guy despite feeling like we're not on the same page at all and feeling disconnected?
Because I love him and I like him, like we've been together since we were 16. We went to high school together, and I know he's a wonderful person. I just felt like in the marathon of life, like we were going through a really, really rough patch, and I just didn't want to break up over it. I mean, I was like, hated him and was like furious with him. And I'm sure he felt the same way as me. But, I heard a great line recently too, or a while ago, that was like, older people that have been married for a long time, they're like, how come you never, split up? And they were like, well, we never wanted to get divorced at the same time. And I feel like I could relate to that, because it was like, no, I'm not giving up on this. I didn't think it was going to make life better to not have him around. It was just really, really frustrating to not be wanting the same thing at the same time. And like I said, a lot of it was financial. And it was like, I remember being like, how can you put a price tag on like a potential child? And, I thought he was being really petty and money focused. And that really infuriated me. Like, I was like, I would pay $1 million, $5 million, $5 bajillion. Like the money to me was a non-issue, so that was a big point of contention as well.
Well, we have like tunnel vision, right? It's tunnel vision. Like we have a destination in mind, and like it doesn't matter if we have to like crawl over spiky things and like like pretty much mutilate our bodies and our lives in every single way to get there. It's like the mission is clear.
Totally.
And so I think they just don't get it. And I find that, we end up having a lot of resentment towards them because they don't get it. And we're often seeking for them to like understand and be a support system to us. And they can't.
Yeah.
And they won't. And that's a hard thing to digest too, where you're like my life, you are my life partner. We are doing this together. And I feel like you're really not with me. And I see this a lot with women, which is another reason why, we need this. Which is another reason why we need this community and need this ability to connect with other women who get it, and where we can find support and find that strength. Because I find that this is something I learned in the pandemic too, is that, when we're apart, we're just not as strong, right? Like united, we are stronger and we can move forward. And I do find that in terms of, fertility, in terms of fertility treatment and the fertility journey, it's endurance and perseverance that will a lot of the time, and then some divine intervention that gets us there.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've interviewed a lot of people, you have over 200 episodes. Are there some stories that stand out to you that you're like, these moments in a story, something that somebody said that, that kind of imparted some wisdom for our listeners, that you're like, that really was a fundamental shift in me when I heard this person say this?
Yes, that's so funny. I was thinking about one this morning. So I recently interviewed Christina Perry, the singer songwriter, and she was amazing. She had a lot of things go on in her family building journey. She had a miscarriage. She had a stillborn. Her daughter Rosie was stillborn, and she has a rainbow baby, Pixie. So she's got two girls now, Carmela and Pixie. But one of the things that she said that really, really resonated with me, that I shared with our Fertility Rally group on one of our support group calls, that everybody was like, yes, I feel that, was Christina was in therapy, and she said, her therapist said to her, when's the last time you felt like the coast was clear? And I was like, oh, I just got the chills to even repeating it, because I feel like as people going through infertility or having problems, building their families, running up against issues, you'd always feel like the other shoe's about to drop. You never feel really settled. Even pregnancy after loss, I feel like you kind of don't feel like you can fully exhale either. And motherhood after infertility, it's just a different world. So the fact that, her therapist asked her that, and then I kind of like asked myself that too, like in the midst of it, like you just don't really feel like the coast is clear. So I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. My last podcast was on miscarriage, recovery, and kind of causes, strategies to move forward, and how to take care of your body, your uterus, and all the things. But the thing is like, once you've kind of felt like your body's betrayed you on this, or like, I don't even think it's like necessarily even just your body. Like people feel like if they have a belief in a higher power, it's like God's betraying you, the universe is betraying you, like
Yeah.
has your back, nobody has your back. You feel like you're under siege.
Yeah.
Like suddenly like the foundation cracks under you, and you just don't feel safe anymore. And having experienced losses myself, like getting pregnant again was not joyful. It was like I was just paralyzed with fear. Like what if this happens again? What if I have to experience that again? Always looking for the sensations. And I feel like, when they're like, oh, make sure the baby's kicking every, whatever, 2 hours, like that is a total mind fuck for me, because like babies can be quiet, but like you're worried about every little thing, every little milestone. And you are just, when you've had bad luck or bad experiences, just waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
But then what did she say about kind of getting past that? Or does she still have it even with her two little girls?
With her, she said she doesn't quite feel that way yet. We talked a lot about mental health and, how your mental health can really suffer when you're going through something like this. For me, now that my son is 7, I do feel in terms of fertility, like the coast is clear for me, but I totally get, somebody who's still in the midst of it, not feeling that way. And it's such a that feeling just sticks with you and sticks with your heart and your brain and makes you always kind of have this sense of unease. And I think that's one of the hard parts of going through, whatever people are going through, is just that lack of control and not knowing if something's going to work out or not, and it's really hard to grapple with that. We talk a lot about how the effort is not equivalent to the result at all in fertility. You can do all the things, but it still doesn't mean it's going to give you what you want necessarily. And it's what other world is like that? Not many. Usually it's if you work really hard at something, you achieve success.
Yeah, you get results from it. Well,
Yeah.
that's actually one of the things that so I see, being in New York City, I have a huge type A contingent, right? That are I work hard, I get what I want, I'm used to getting what I want. I literally have had my patients, a number of them say the exact same thing, which is, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm used to getting what I want after I put the work in to get it. And this is the one thing that I've ever put my mind and heart to that just isn't flowing easily back to me.
Yes.
And I think, even if you don't identify as a type A personality, I feel like the fertility struggle will make you into a type A, because you'll suddenly go to, okay, what can I do? Am I going to do acupuncture? Or am I going to change my diet? What doctor should I see? These 10 doctors, learn all the things, right? So we take charge, which is, there's a balance, because you don't want it to occupy your brain 100% of the time, but you also want to feel empowered with things that you're doing.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's exactly what you said. It's so hard for people who are achieving people to not have success. It's really a mind fuck. It really is. Cause you're I did all the things. I'm doing it all like they said I should, or I'm trying, X, Y, and Z. I would have done anything. Anything. I tried all the things. I went to a psychic. I drank all the herbs. I did the who, you name it. I did it all. I lit magic wish paper, I was
oh yeah. Oh no, you see a shaman, whatever. Yeah, no, it's funny because most of the people that end up in my office are I don't even necessarily believe in this, but I'm here because I'm at the point where it's not working and I'm willing to try just about anything.
Right.
And I say, well, lucky you, because you're about to embark on a world that's just so magical that it's going to serve you in many ways. I'm sorry that you're going through this journey, but I'm glad that it's brought you here.
Right.
All aside, you having heard so many stories and having been through this through this yourself, what would what words would you impart with our listeners that, that are kind of in the trenches right now?
First, I would say, we see you, and I'm so sorry for whatever you're going through. It's hard. It's not fair. It sucks. It's lonely. Every feeling that you're feeling is valid. The anger, the not wanting to see your pregnant sister, the being pissed off at your best friend because you have to help plan the baby shower, all that stuff is valid. It's really, really, it's a hard space to be in. So I just want to acknowledge that. And then I would say, please reach out and find your people, whether it's Christina or it's me and Fertility Rally and Blair, my partner, whether it's listening to podcasts or finding, a group that you connect with that's a little more niche or specific. My DMs are always open. You can always reach out to me. If I just feel like it's, even if you're not comfortable sharing your story, to know that people are out there that are going through it, I think is really powerful. And to know you are not alone. There's people out there who, will cheerlead on your behalf, who are going to be your hype women, who, want you to succeed. Our tagline for Fertility Rally is the worst club with the best members, because like you said at the beginning, this community really does want to share resources and help each other out. So there's definitely people out there who, even if you think what you're going through is weird or specific or whatever, I'm sure there's somebody you can connect with. So please, don't hesitate to reach out to me. People can DM me, they can email me at infertileafstories@gmail, all that stuff. But I just don't want people to feel alone, because that's on top of everything else that makes it so much worse.
Oh no, it's terrible. When you're going through anything, the loneliness just compounds it and makes you kind of sit in the darkness. And there is light, it feels like there's no light on, when you're in this. But there is, and I believe that it comes about when you connect with others. So thank you for being with us today, Allie. This was amazing. Everybody check out Infertile AF Podcast and Fertility Rally. And reach out to Allie Prato and her partner Blair and get connected.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions about Fertility Rally and what it entails, I'm happy to answer any questions. If anybody wants to check out a support group and just see if it's their jam before they commit, please, I'm happy to, have that happen too. So yeah, they can, on Instagram, it's Infertile AF Stories, or Instagram Fertility Rally. So reach out. We are here for you.
And we will post everything in the show notes so that you guys have those resources if you didn't get a chance to write it down.
Yeah. Thank you. I love what you're doing too. So thank you so much for having me. And thanks for, being so passionate about helping women.
Oh, it is my jam. I love it. And I love women who are, taking on the world to get this done. And I am more than happy to be a support. And I think, this is a good lesson in coming together.
Definitely.